Welcome along to the Make It Count podcast. My name is David.
My name is Matt.
And we are the Taylor Bros.
We are. And this week we hope you're not too busy to listen to us for a few minutes.
Yeah, we've done a bit of an episode on busyness, didn't we? Too busy to live.
Emotionally and spiritually healthy.
Yeah, it's like you complete my sentences.
Only on the podcast.
And today you saw an article, right?
I did. It was an article I actually read a while ago, and it reminded me of someone I knew from when we were on the ship.
Oh, yeah.
And they were, at the time, they were a shift leader.
Okay.
For a specific role, and I was having a discussion with them one day, and I said, "Have you had a break today? Have you taken lunch?" And they're like, "Nah, it's too crazy. It's too crazy out here. If I don't take a break, if I take a break and go, something's going to happen."
And I'm sure you were very affirming of that. You said, "Hey, that's a really good work ethic." And the article was the same, right? The article said, "No breaks. I can rest when I'm dead."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we are most efficient when we just keep going, keep grinding, and we never take a break. And we actually just get better and better and better.
Yeah.
No.
Is that not what the article said?
Unfortunately not. Well, actually, fortunately not. And that is also not the advice I gave to this person. I said, look, you've got to go and take a break. You're clearly exhausted, and you'll make better decisions after you've taken a break. Mm-hmm. And I read this article last year, and it reminded me, last week's episode reminded me of it, and it is, are you too busy to take a break?
That's a good title. You might think that you're too busy to go read it, because when you can put it in a reader mode, and it tells you roughly how long it takes you to read.
Yes.
Yeah, it said 13 to 16 minutes.
Yes, so if we can make it shorter episode than that, we've saved you time.
Exactly. So the first three things it said why you should take a break.
Yep.
I managed to
remember them.
Yeah.
Go on then.
Bored.
Breaks keep you from getting bored. Yeah.
Yep, keeps you from getting bored. Helps you make connections.
Yes.
And reevaluate your goals.
Yes. The second one, it's not just make connections, but also retain information. Mm-hmm. So helps actually memory and then make new connections.
Yeah. And so do you want to take them in order?
Yeah, let's go for that.
Help you from getting bored.
Yes.
And the idea is that sometimes when we work endlessly without having a break, we can kind of get a bit in the weeds. We can kind of get a bit lost in the task and just a bit bored doing it. Spending hours and hours and hours. Yeah. If you're most office workers, 8 hours a day doing the same job, sometimes you might be on that thing all day without a break. Let's be honest, by hour 3 or 4 you're probably a little bit bored. By about hour 7, if you hadn't had a break, it's quite a lot. So
definitely
having that 15-minute break or however long can help you refresh, come at it a little bit fresher.
Yeah, and in the article they had some statistics taken from obviously some survey data that said how many people. So it was something like 80% of these people surveyed didn't take a single break outside of their lunch break during an 8-hour workday, despite the fact that within the same pool of data, 9 out of 10 managers encouraged people to take breaks, and 86% of them believed that they would work better if they had a break. And they said the biggest problem was they felt guilty. Mm-hmm. And so it's going, well, if you're bored and you're getting fatigued, the boredom setting in, actually you're likely to be more productive after having a brief break.
Mm-hmm. But, part of me wonders about what the example is then. It's all very well for a manager to say, I want you guys to take a break, but they never do, then it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, that's kind of...
Maybe that's a bit of a subsection.
Do what I say, not what I do.
Yeah.
Idea.
The idea of making connections is the second reason why you should take breaks, and really breaks within a day as opposed to holiday breaks, is quite an interesting one. But obviously we've seen examples of this where... was it the periodic table? Ultimately, took a break on solving the problem, literally dreamed it up, but actually they were saying there's lots of research that we often solve more intractable problems when we're not trying to solve them, when they're going on in the back, and we rob ourselves of that insight, of that solution, if we don't take a break.
Yes, the language they brought up, and I quite like it. There's almost two modes of thinking. There's focused thinking and then there's diffuse thinking, or diffuse. And if we only focus to the detriment of diffuse, we're actually robbing ourselves of the opportunity to make connections. And I was listening, I think it was Simon Sinek, who one of his videos recently, and he was saying, you ever wonder why, you have all your best ideas in the shower? It's like, it's not because there's something magical about showers. It's because we've got so few times in our daily rhythms now where we don't have more input, and I'm focusing on some task or being directed in some way. So that is one of the only places where we might have an opportunity to have diffuse thinking in these words now. And it's like, oh yeah. So actually, it's when I do this in my own work, I take breaks, but I don't think of them as breaks away from work. I allow my mind to wander a little bit. I go for a walk around the block or whatever. We'll maybe come to that in a bit. But I know actually my mind is probably still thinking on some of those things, even if I'm just letting it wander. It's not, I'm not doing work. I'm allowing my brain to come up with new connections it wouldn't have if I just stayed staring at that screen.
Yeah, so stops us getting bored, helps us make connections and retain information, and helps us reevaluate our goals. And that's, again, sometimes with a piece of work we can get lost in the weeds, in the details, and actually we come back out and go, actually, this piece of work isn't even the most important thing I need to do today.
Yes.
But you could lose a whole day if you didn't have a break between that point.
Or the way I'm trying to go about this isn't going as well as I thought. How about let's try a different tack?
Yeah. And so it can help you get some perspective, and they talk about different ways of breaking up your day. Like, I'm sure many of you have heard of the Pomodoro method. That's the
25-5.
25-5, and there's other ones,
So for those who don't understand, 25 minutes working, 5-minute break. 25 minutes working, 5-minute
not
break.
25-minute break, 5-minute work.
No. It's definitely, you still want to be doing more work than break.
And then there's different ways of breaking that up, and I think you can figure that out based on how much freedom you have, what works. They said, the best one is something like 54-17. I don't know how they decided that was the best. I have not read that research. It sounds very exact, which is probably why they think it sounds the best.
I read it a little bit more detail. So the first three methods they talk about kind of very strict, like chunking. So 25 minutes work, 5 minutes break. That's the classic Pomodoro one. And then the other one is 90-minute work chunks. And the idea of this apparently came from sort of the 90-minute natural rhythms in the sleep patterns, and saying actually that kind of continues in our day. And there was a guy, Professor K. Anders Ericsson, apparently was studying elite performers in lots of different fields, musicians, athletes.
Yeah, heard of Anders Ericsson.
And he basically discovered that the best people in all these different fields studied in no more than 90-minute focused chunks. And this is, again, a really important part of this. Like, it's not a case of just do the same sort of bog standard attention in your works and then take more time off. It's the time off allows you to then come in and do these focused sprints when you're actually focusing. And then I think it was 52-17. And basically, I think this is some more up-to-date research, but it's just cutting those two in the middle. It's kind of halfway between 25 and the 90, and there's a bit of again, really what we're saying is it's not necessarily there's one magic number that if you do it you'll suddenly, but it is a kind of a principle. And there are definitely some tasks that it goes, 25 minutes isn't going to do it. I don't really actually get into the swing. 90 minutes is maybe too long, so somewhere in the middle of that with a break is can be good. So play around with it, I would say.
Yeah, and again, that's not the most important part of this. I think the most important part is what you do in those breaks, really, because if you're going to check your emails on your screen and you spend all day on your screens, or you're going to be on your phone, that isn't going to be the place where you can make those connections, where you can kick back.
It's not going to be as much of a break as something else.
Yeah, and it's all the things we've talked about. Going for a walk, it's allowing yourself to daydream, it's getting up out of your chair and going somewhere.
Doodling, apparently.
Doodling, those sorts of things.
Creative.
That allow your brain to go a little bit more diffuse rather than deal with the input. And I think many of us, we fail with our breaks because we put the input in.
Yeah, I mean, here was one that was a bit, bit of a kickback to old times. Talk with a colleague. Can you remember that?
Yeah. So,
and people always used to complain. Well, I say when we went into the pandemic, I remember this. People like bosses and everything were saying, "Wow, we are so much more effective and efficient now because we don't have all of that time wasted talking with each other in the office." And it's like, actually, and we've talked about this before, I'm sure it was either Google or Apple or one of them, when they designed some of their buildings and their headquarters, they literally designed it such that different teams, in order to make it to the cafeteria or make it, would have to cross paths, and their natural meeting points. And that's not just a case of then each person individually is taking a little mental break. You're literally stimulating cross-pollination of ideas to help make even more connections. So, yeah, it's not time wasted if you're doing it intentionally. And also, but there is that element of just, it's not spontaneous, it's serendipitous encounters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I think the lie is that, of not taking a break, of feeling guilty about taking a break, is that it is actually not still productive in some way, and that the most effective thing is to just keep going, and actually a recognition that a break can kick you back up so that you can be far more productive, effective, efficient, creative even,
and make better decisions.
So let us know what you think.
Yeah. No, before we finish, the last piece of research they did, I thought it was really fascinating. It was on airline pilots.
Right.
And they basically did some research, and they said pilots that, against a control study, who didn't have, like, long haul flights, didn't have a nap, those pilots that didn't have a nap, their reaction time decreased as the flight went on, 34% or something. Well, it got worse. But then pilots that had like a 15-minute nap at some point, their reaction time was 35% better than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah, and it's, again, none of this is unsurprising. It's intuitive. We know when we've had a good, proper rest that we can come back and we can come in a bit sharper.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think. Do you take breaks? Do you find that a guilt thing there? Would you be able to have that conversation at work about how that would work? Let us know what you think.